Book 101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's a relationship expert as well as an author too, and the author of her latest book, Thriving in a Relationship When You Have a Chronic Illness. None other than Miss Lisa Gray.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome, Miss Lisa, on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've been working as a mental health professional since 2004 and specializing mostly in couples and mostly in couples with really high conflict or really intractable issues. And then in 2009, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. And so I started seeing that many of my couples also had an issue with chronic illness. And so then I sort of segued into working with couples where chronic illness was in the picture. And so it's kind of my passion to help them navigate that issue in their life.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Lisa. Thank you. The thriving mindset. Many resources focus on coping or surviving chronic illness in relationship. Why did you choose the word thriving, and how does acceptance and commitment therapy fundamentally shift the goal for a couple?
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a lot of discussion actually about the word thriving because some folks with chronic illness really have a strong reaction to that word. Like you said, um, we didn't want a chronic illness. We didn't ask for a chronic illness, and so it's sometimes hard to get out of that just surviving mindset. And I really did like the word thriving because I wanted couples to know that it is still possible to thrive in your relationship. It just may be like a redefinition of what thriving looks like or means. And so acceptance and commitment therapy is a theory that I practice quite a bit. And the idea is that instead of trying to get rid of symptoms, like anxiety, or instead of trying to get push your experience away, you accept all of your emotional experiences. So you're not trying to go back to someplace you were before. You're just accepting whatever's happening to you in the moment, whatever feelings are going on, but you commit to behaviors that match your values in life. And so I think this is a really important theory to use with chronic illness because identifying what your values are can help you to still live a meaningful life and to still thrive.
Can you briefly walk us through the six core process of acceptance, cognitive diffusion, and present moment self-context values, committed action, and give one example of a single process can directly help a couple facing a health crisis?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was walking along one day and I was thinking about ACT and how there's six core processes to ACT, and I was thinking about how chronic illness is sort of a grieving process, and then we know there's these stages of grief, which of course we all know are not organized stages. You don't go through them one at a time. There's nothing, there's no endpoint or anything. But I got to thinking maybe I could match up the six core processes of ACT with the six stages of grieving to kind of help organize the way the book is laid out. So for like when you first get diagnosed and you're in kind of like shock or denial, I find the ACT core skill of being in the present moment is really helpful. So in other words, you're gonna really try to be where you are and feel what you're feeling. It's really hard to kind of adjust to this new way of being. So being here now is just a mindfulness term, being in the moment that you're in, not in the past or the future. And then for anger, but you can use this for any place you are in life, cognitive diffusion. It's kind of a complicated phrase, but really what it means is just to unhook from your thoughts. So we have thoughts because those thoughts are in our own head. We tend to believe them. So if I say to myself, like an example would be, if I say to myself, I am always sick or I never feel good, then that can feel true and it leads me into a really negative place. So, an example of a trick for cognitive diffusion is if I say, oh, interesting, I notice I'm having the thought that I never feel good, or I notice that I'm telling myself I never feel good. That unhooks me from the thought and helps me step back and just get a little bit of space between me and the thought so I can decide, is that really true? Do I really need to buy into that way of thinking? So cognitive diffusion is really helpful for anger, but it's helpful for all kinds of things. And then when we talk about bargaining, like the, oh, if only I hadn't, climbed up on that ladder, or if only I hadn't got stung by that mosquito, or what, whatever it might be that you're bargaining about, that's where the act skill of creating values really comes in. So getting in touch with like, what are your values in life? So values are different than activities or goals. Value is something like, to be a compassionate person or to make a difference in the world, leave the world a better place than I found it, those kinds of things. So when you narrow into what your core values are in life, then that takes you to the next act core skill, which is committed action. So if my value is helping underprivileged children by, let's say as an example, maybe before I got sick, I had cooking classes down at the local community center or something like that. And maybe now that I'm sick and I have less energy, I still want to be true to that value. Maybe I make YouTube videos about cooking when I have a good day or something like that. So the committed actions that you decide to take come out of your values. So you have to do the values first and then the committed action. And then there's self as context, which is another kind of confusing phrase, but it's the Buddhists would call this the observing self. It's the idea that um, I'm not just my thinking, I'm not just my thoughts. Like there's the me that's thinking, and then there's the me that can observe myself thinking. So it's kind of like the sky and the clouds. Like the clouds are your thoughts or your illness or things that happen to you, but you're the sky. So you're outside of your experience and you're able to take a step back and observe it. And that's really helpful if you're in the depression stage to be able to realize like this is bigger than just this one experience that I'm having. And then, of course, the last core skill is acceptance, which is a hard word for many people. And it does not mean that you think your chronic illness is okay. It doesn't mean that you think it's fair. It just means that you accept that it's reality. And so, acceptance is not some place where you land as like a permanent result. You might just get there every once in a while for a moment or a day or an hour. So those are the basic skills. Yeah.
So, Miss Lisa, this is a crucial distinction. How do you help couples understand and accepting reality of a chronic illness is not the same as giving up or resigning themselves to a life suffering?
Mhm. Well, that's kind of why I like acceptance and commitment therapy, because accepting that you have a chronic illness, that this is now your life, it's not what you signed up for, but here you are with a chronic illness. That acceptance is paired with the committed action. So it's like accepting does not mean we're not going to pursue some kind of treatment. It does not mean that we're not going to continue to do research. It doesn't mean that we're not going to still hope for some kind of a cure. It just means that we're not looking back and trying to get back to something we used to have or dreaming about where we might get to. That we're firmly established in this moment that we're in. Wherever we might get to, we accept that this is where we are right now. And that's can be really helpful.
Miss Lisa, we often focus on patients' grief, but What does a grief loss and frustration look like for the well or caregiving partner? How can ACT help them make space for these difficult emotions without guilt?
Yeah, I tell you, it's a tough one. I find that, and I'm speaking as someone who has a chronic illness myself, that when you have a chronic illness, it's easy to be like, hey, I'm the one who's sick, so I'm the one who's grieving, I'm the one who's lost everything. And the fact is that your partner is also grieving. You know, they also did not sign up for a change in lifestyle, and they also didn't plan on being a caregiver, and so they have their own grieving process, but it's going to look very different from your grieving process. And you're probably not going to be in the same stages at the same time or whatever. And so the caregiver can also use ACT to sort of be in their present moment, accept where they're at, but defining their own values. So, like, let's say that, um, health or being physically active was one of their values before, and maybe as a couple, they went and played tennis or went, whitewater rafting or something. If the well partner can identify that that is still one of their values, that they're allowed to pursue their values, then they can commit towards actions that still honor those values. So maybe now they're playing tennis with someone else, or maybe, they're going whitewater rafting with someone else, or maybe they're adjusting their physical activity so that, they're not away from their partner so much if they can't be. Um, but the piece about without guilt, I think, is the hardest part. And it's really important for the caregiver to work on, because if a caregiver feels too much guilt, they're not going to speak to their partner about their own grief or experience. And that's not good. That's not going to do the relationship any good over time. And they're not going to go out and take care of themselves because they feel too guilty. And what I see happen all the time is that eventually the caregiver just breaks down and maybe leaves the relationship or disappears emotionally from the relationship, and that's not helpful to anyone. So it's kind of a mutual part of the process to get the sick partner to really support their well partner to go out and pursue their values and be affirming about that, so that the well partner doesn't have as much guilt and is willing to do that, because it has to be done if the relationship is going to thrive.
Miss Lisa, the relationship identity often shift from what it was is now. How can couple collaboratively define the new we based on their shared values rather than being defined by the illness?
Yeah, that's why I love the values work, because values work kind of goes beyond whatever's happening right now. Like, even if you're not sick, if you can determine what your values are, then you can always live towards those values throughout the thick and thin of like all your different experiences. And so that's why I love values work for chronic illness, because the values don't necessarily have to change all that much from what they were before you were sick. It's just that the goals, the activities might change because your energy levels are different, or the days that you have that you feel well enough to do something, it feels different. But the value, so the conversation with couples is, how can we take the values that you used to have and adjust your life to those values with your current functioning? And so they're still living their life of meaning. They're still living their life of values. Yes, the chronic illness is going to be a big part of that, but it's, if you can, if the focus can be on living towards your values, then the chronic illness sort of takes a backseat to that, which is a really nice way to take it out of the focal point and still make sure you're living to your values.
Interesting, Miss Lisa. So, as a relation expert, as an author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Oh, Um, I'm really into training the next generation of therapists. And so I have 6 therapists who work for me, and they're all experts in chronic illness as well. And I love to mentor people. And so that's kind of been my focus. And I've written 2 books. My editor would like me to write more. I'm not sure exactly yet what my next sort of passionate topic will be, but trying to get this one launched for now.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Lisa, and looking forward
Thanks.
for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Hmm, I would say just step out and do it. It's like I thought about writing a book for most of my life, and it wasn't until the pandemic where I had some extra time, and I thought, oh, I'll just, it was sort of a lark. I mean, I didn't really think that it was going to happen, and so I think a lot of people think about their dreams and dream their dreams, but they don't actually step out and do something about it. So you never know, someone might love your idea. So just go ahead and actually step out and do it and take the risk.
Just do it, people. Stop
Yep.
procrastinating. And share your talents to the world. Thank you for that advice, Miss Lisa. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yeah, for couples of all types, I love the book Wired for Love by Stan Tatkin. It's just a great relationship book. And then if you want to know more about just the basics of ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, the book The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris is just a fantastic read.
A fantastic read, and thank you for that recommended book, Miss Lisa. So, how can a couples unhook from the unhelpful story that illness ruin our relationship and begin another narrative about residence, depth, and chosen love?
Yeah, I think that actually going through that stage that illness kind of ruined our life is part of the grieving process. I mean, it did kind of in a way, like you had a certain life, you had things set up a certain way that has now been destroyed largely. And so it is part of the grieving process, I think, to go through that period of time. But then to understand, like maybe your first marriage is over, and now you're going to have a second marriage, and it's going to look different. You're going to be second marriage with the same person, and it's going to look different than your first. That does so we're going to have to rebuild it. We're going to have to remake it, but that doesn't mean that it can't be great. So grieving and letting go of your old life is an important part of the process. And then just like any kind of grief, there comes a point where you have to make some meaning out of that and start something new. So if you work the full process, you're going to grieve your old life, and then you're going to turn and look at ways that you can create something entirely new.
What is the biggest mistake you see couples make when trying to navigate chronic illness? And what is the ACT informed antidote?
Mm. Yeah, I think the biggest mistake is not having empathy for one another. So, oftentimes, especially with invisible illnesses like fibromyalgia or Lyme disease and things like that, the well partner sometimes just doesn't believe their partner. I mean, you can't see the illness really, you can't see fatigue, you can't see joint pain, that kind of stuff. And so, the well partner can sometimes have a lack of empathy towards how painful their partner's experience is. And then, like I said, the sick partner often has a lack of empathy for their partner because, after all, they're still well. Like, what's their problem? They're healthy. They shouldn't be having any problems. And the healthy partner is also going through a huge grieving process as well. So I think the biggest mistake I see is just not developing empathy for one another. Um, and ACT has a lot to say about that. I think, like, being in the present moment instead of in all of your judgments, and just hearing what your partner's experience is and believing it. Also, really tapping into your values and committed action. So if your values are that you want to respect and love each other, then your committed action has to be that you're empathetic to each other even if you don't feel like being empathetic. So, ACT is all about like saying, hey, I notice I have this feeling of resentment coming up, and that's okay. But when I behave towards my partner, I'm going to behave with empathy.
Interesting, Miss Lisa. And for a couple listening right now who feels overwhelmed, which one 5-minute exercise they could try tonight to start reconnecting?
Mhm. I think, one of the things that really gets affected when you're sick is like intimacy and touch because, you just don't feel good. And one exercise that I really like having my couples do is to have the well partner sit on a couch or in a chair or in the bed. And then the sick partner sits kind of on their lap facing the same way, and they put their arms around each other and just try to match their breathing together. So just breathing together while they're touching, but in a very, accessible way, even if you have limited energy. I think that, touch is a magical healing force, and most of us don't do it enough, just simple holding hands or snuggling. And so just don't forget that that's such an important part of just your humanity and your healing. And it doesn't have to be something major, it can just be a simple eye contact or matching your breathing or holding hands or just making sure that you're also physically connected while you're trying to navigate this emotional landscape that you're in as well.
Miss Lisa, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast law 101, and mental health 101, love letters in third season, and movie 101 review, music 101 fourth season, and science 101 and science 101 and sex 101 and second season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Lisa, if you could leave our listeners with one core message about potential for their relationship in the face of chronic illness, what would it be?
I think my core message would just be you can still thrive. It's not going to look the same as it used to be. It's not going to be the same as it used to be, but with enough empathy and communication and practicing these concepts, you can still have a thriving relationship. So don't give up.
Yes, people don't give up, and hope is always in the
Yes.
corner. So, Miss Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world.
Thank
So,
you for having me.
yes, looking forward for more and more empowering books like this to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your books, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, you can find me online at lisagrayauthor.com. My books are on Amazon and Tertulia. And my therapy website is lisagraymft.com. And I'm on Instagram, lisagraymft. And I also review self help books at Therapy Book Nook.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Lisa Gray because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Lisa, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
More to come, people. See you soon.